This is called Beyond Hello World. This is not a 101 level, but I will try and make it 101 friendly enough that people who don't know anything about Flutter will at least be able to hold on for dear life and follow it. The handouts I was going to have printed, they're 5 pages. I decided not to do that to the poor organizers here, so there's a URL right there, tinyurl.com below, did I write below? No, Beyond Hello World. Don't worry, I cut and pasted it. I couldn't typo screw it up. So, but that will give you the handout. Okay. So as I said, this is Beyond Hello World. It's not Hello World. And we are going to be going a little deeper, a little faster, and we're going to play around and show you folks a couple ways to do state management, some very simple state management, but still. And with that, let's get started. Okay. Hello, mouse. Oh, okay. Let me see. There we go. Good. What makes Flutter unique? Okay, unlike other cross-platform solutions, it compiles to ARM binary. It's binary when the user installs it. There is no interpreted code at all. Okay, so in the sense of interpreted code, there is no VM. We'll get into that caveat a little later. Casey's late. Get in here. It's not reliant on OEM widgets. That will make a lot more sense when I can show you in a graph, or not in a graph, I'm sorry, in an image. But that is significant in a number of ways. Number one, it means that you're not stuck with the UI that came with the phone or the tablet or whatever. You make your own. You're fine. And another nice thing about it is in the Apple world, a lot of times, they will turn around and deprecate things and break your app. They can't do that to you if you're using Flutter. Unlike React, there's no bridge needed. Again, much like the other things, it will make more sense when you see the pictures. There's no VM in the release code to slow things down, as I said. There are a couple of caveats in there. The debug builds are just-in-time compiled. That is a VM. Okay, that's a debug build. What that does is when we have ahead-of-time compiled release and just-in-time compiled debug, it allows you to look at your code and make a change and hit a button, and your just-in-time compiled debug will show you the result sometimes in less than a second. Tweak it a little left, boom, I can see it. Tweak it a little right, I can see it. Okay, change the wording on the entire thing, change all of your text. You hit it, it comes right up. On Android, sometimes the little lightning bolt in Android Studio works, sometimes it doesn't. In Flutter, it always works. Okay. And that's because they're just-in-time compiled and debugged, but when you flip it around and you go to release, it changes it to ahead-of-time compiled. And to give you an idea of how big the difference is, the debug builds come with this little red banner in the upper right that you can turn it off, but it's there. Well, those really old farts that were back in alpha, well, not early alpha, but alpha, you folks might remember when that banner used to say slow mode instead of debug. It actually said slow mode on it, reminding you, get out of this, don't give it to the user that way. So, this is a look at the way OEM SDKs are set up. You have native code. It's going to the OEM, and what we're calling widgets here is UI elements, UI components, whatever. It's your list views, it's your recycler views, it's your image views. Okay? Then paints it to the canvas and handles touch events. You have other things for the hardware, services down here. Okay, now when you get into native proxies, you're also running native code, but it's different native code. So now you need a framework proxy in order to translate. You're still using the same OEM widgets and everything else is the same. Reactive views. Very similar setup using JavaScript. Now we call it a bridge. Still, you have to traverse back and forth and translate back and forth so many times. That's a lot of cycles being devoted to this. Okay? Web views. Slightly different. JavaScript. Going directly to a web view. Now that's a neat trick. Apple can't deprecate your UI widget anymore with a web view. You're in control of it. That's a good thing. Okay, pretty much. Still a bridge here. Sometimes there's no getting around that when you're dealing with the services. Okay. Now, Flutter's approach. We have native code here. Interesting thing is we've moved the UI into the APK. It's no longer part of the framework. That allows you to do some really wicked things with it and make it into anything you want. Okay, now we also, as I said, have platform channels to get to the services. Sometimes there's no getting around things. Now at a higher level, more under the hood, here's what's actually happening. Okay, when you start up Flutter in Android, it starts out a regular view, and in iOS it does its equivalent. It opens the Flutter app. The Flutter app says, give me a GPU texture. Give me a GPU surface view. Now get out of my way. That's it. And now Flutter is running, it's doing its own code, and it's rendering directly to that texture. The Android framework is not doing anything else, which is a big difference. Oh, wrong way, sorry. It's a big difference because in this was handling, this is always handling the rendering, right? You're always telling the framework what you want done. With Flutter, you're not telling the framework what you want done. You're telling the framework to get out of the way. All right? What this means is that since you're creating your own UI elements and you're shipping your own UI inside your APK, you can do anything. All right? You can put material design or your personal design or human interface compliant UIs on phones that were created before material design was even created, before it even came to be. I can put, if I turn around and I look at what's on the newest iPhone, and I figure out how they did it according to the published human interface specs, I can recreate that in Flutter and put it on an iPhone 6. Okay? Imagine all the people in South America, Africa, the Middle East, places where they can't afford to get a new phone every couple of years. What are they going to do when they find out they can get something that works and looks just like the latest and greatest on their iPhone 7? All right, I see a lot of heads nodding out here. It means money. Yeah, these people can only afford 99 cents at a time, but you know what? If you deliver something really good on their older hardware that's all they can afford, they're going to come to you. Don't underestimate that. We're talking 2-3 billion people throughout the world that are not running the latest and greatest tech. So, basically saying the same thing in a slightly different way. One of the things I always tell people is take a class 5 different times from 5 different people, because the first 4 might say it in a way that doesn't make any sense, and the 5th one will say it in a way that makes the light bulb go on over your head, and then you'll think, oh yeah, that's what they were trying to tell me. Similar graphic, similar idea, okay? Flutter's native binary, I brought my UI. Give me a canvas, hold my beer. Period. Flutter's UI widgets and rendering, Android native binary, Android UI, not used. We're doing an end run around the framework in both directions for the most part, although with platform channels, actually you do have to go through here somewhat to get the services. Now, if you need something, I need to run an errand. Okay, maybe we go into here and get, who knows, some plugin, something. You can turn around, if you wanted to put a recycler view into your Flutter app, you can do it. I don't know why you would want to, but you can do it. If you have something in particular maybe that you custom designed for Android or iOS, and you don't quite know how to get it in Flutter, or you can't quite get the support for it that you need in Flutter, you can just run and fetch it and put it in the Flutter app. Right now, that's how most people are doing Google Maps. Okay, and the Flutter team is working furiously on that issue, believe me. It's like one of the #1 heartburn things going on right now. They have worked hard with the Maps team. They've been going crazy. And the biggest, now there is some stuff that's being experimented with. It's out there on GitHub. I'm not sure the status of it, and it's rough around the edges. But the solution that they're all saying right now is import a view from Android. Just use a platform channel, go into Android, fire up Google Maps in an Android view, and plop it in the middle of your Flutter app until we can get this other thing straightened out. So yeah, it's a little rough at that point for Maps, but that's not going to stop you. If you want this done, you can still get it done by tomorrow at dinner time if you were determined, or even sooner. Platform channels again, last time we'll beat this horse. Flutter app client with its state, it uses a method channel. Now, you'll see platform channel, method channel. Why the two different names? Somebody, if you find out, explain it to me. I have no idea, okay? We call it platform channels in conversation. When you go to write it into the code, it's a method channel. Just somebody somewhere started using the term platform and it stuck. So as you can see with iOS, app delegate, Android host the activity. You can reach right down in there, get whatever you need, and send it right back. So you're not stuck with just Flutter. You can butcher parts of Android out of it and and iOS, and you can put them inside of Flutter. And the reverse is true as well. There are a lot of people who are saying, how can I convert my app to Flutter? First question, why? You've got this app that's like 4 million lines of code, and you want to convert it to Flutter because it's cool to be able to say you did? No, don't do that. Just no, there's no reason to. Now, if there's something you can't do, but you would be able to do it in Flutter, then yeah. And another thing too is, a lot of times people who are doing that, they're only putting Flutter components into their Android or iOS. They're not porting the whole thing over to Flutter, they're just rewriting one part of it. So just like you can take an Android Maps view and drop it right into Flutter, you can create a Flutter UI and drop it right into an Android app. And a lot of people are considering that right now because Flutter's real strength is UI and animation. That's where it's strongest. And if you couple that with a well-established background from the other two a well-established back end from the other two frameworks, that's a hard combination to beat. Okay. Self-explanatory. Okay. You'll hear a lot of grumbling about Dart. I can guarantee you the people grumbling about Dart are the people who haven't spent 20 minutes trying Dart. It's really that easy. Okay. The history of Dart. History of the World Part 1, Mel Brooks. The goal was to be a JavaScript killer. That didn't work out so well. Not at all. So it was just in time compiled only in 2013. Performance issues, this, that, and the other. If you're trying to do what all this was meant to do, you're really better off with JavaScript. So what ended up happening was it was not in Chrome. End of the world, fail whale, kill the project, right? Dart sucks, nobody uses Dart, it's dead. People are still saying Dart is dead. Where have they been? So they did a shift. They pivoted to ahead of time compilation, strong mode, async, and await. Strong mode is something that existed in Dart 1. It went away. Dart 2 is strongly typed, period, full stop. Okay. 2015 roadmap announced Dart 2 for early 2016. Yeah, that didn't work out. No. Dart 2 actually came out, people who know this, what we went We put it in beta in January or February, and finally just put it in, I guess about April or May is when it got fully shifted over. Yeah, and I don't mean 2016. So anyway, that all got done. So now we're compiling to ARM. They're working on the tools. The tools and all are now multi-platform. Web, mobile, Dart VM, I have no idea anything about that. I know they exist. Flutter does not do anything with the VM. It does not do anything with compiling to JavaScript. Has nothing to do with the way Dart can be used on the web. So don't ask me about that. I have no idea. Dart 2 launches in 2018. Abby Normal lives again. Okay. Now, Dart's easy. Half an hour. I am not kidding. The vast majority of what you need to know you can pick up in actually the vast majority you can pick up in 10 minutes. I'm assuming everyone here has done some kind of mobile. Is there anyone here who does not know Java, JavaScript, Kotlin, Swift, or Objective-C? Anyone here who doesn't know at least one of those? You'll know Dart in 10 minutes. C syntax, sorry Kotlin folks, we have to go back to semicolons. I know, I cried. There's no public or private. If you say nothing, it's public. If you put that in front, it's private. It's that simple. It takes a couple of hours to get used to that and read it at full speed without overlooking it. Simplified types, integer and double. No float, no long, no short. Integer, double. Move on. Nice and simple. Strings, no char. We're keeping it easy here. List, enum, map, type, reified generics. We don't use floats, arrays, chars long, short, etc. Don't freak out on arrays. There's a reason we can get away with this. Okay, long-time programmers who really know their stuff will be looking at it like, wait, you're using lists for everything? Oh my God. Your first, okay, you guys can read that. Now I know everybody smiling has kids. Okay, and that, we haven't really agreed on a convention for a ternary yet. Some people are putting it down here, some people are putting it over there, some people are doing it on one line. Whatever's easy to read. So basically, if you've got a few minutes to spare, if you've got more than 30 minutes to spare, or I'm sorry, if you don't have 30 minutes to spare, you have kids. Otherwise, if you used a C-style language, you can learn Dart in half an hour. Otherwise, you're already not doing mobile anyway, so learn Flutter. Dart is open source web programming language. It was developed originally by Google. It is class-based, strongly typed, single inheritance with mixins, object-oriented, C-style syntax. Boy, somebody from marketing just had a moment there with all the buzzwords. Okay. Interfaces, abstract classes, reified generics. Okay, I'm assuming everyone here knows what all that is since this is not a 101. Next. And we got to keep moving anyway. This is the big one. If you get nothing else out of this talk, when people say what Flutter can do, a lot of times people will turn around and look at you and say, nothing can do that. You're exaggerating, you're this, you're that, or no, that can't be true. This is the star of the show. Dart's garbage collector, Young Space Scavenger Parallel Mark Sweep. I am not a garbage collector expert, but I have been assured by people who are that those who know garbage collection quite well will understand the significance of this. Okay? If this garbage collector is not nearly as expensive as ones you've worked with in the past. It's not going to eat up as many cycles, and that's important to not have jank while you're going through and trying to clean everything up. It's because of this that we can construct and destroy thousands of objects per frame. I have heard it from the lips of Eric Seidel, the head of the Flutter project himself, that it's possible to construct and destroy over 10,000 objects a frame without jank. Without this garbage collector, none of it happens. Okay, and that's one of the reasons that they went with Dart. There are a lot of great languages out there. Kotlin's a fantastic language. Overall, Kotlin's probably a better language than Dart. But you don't drive a hammer. I'm sorry, you don't drive a nail with a laptop. You've got to have the right tool for the right job. And for this job, for the fact that Dart is drilling as deep as it is with composition, which we'll go into in a minute, you've got to have this garbage collector, or it's just a non-starter. Okay, Kotlin's a great tool for a lot of things, but Dart's the right tool for this job. There's a tree shaking compiler. Anything that you're not actively using in your code does not go into your APK. Period, full stop. So when they say that they're bundling the framework into the APK and you're taking your UI with you, yes, but you're only taking the parts that you're going to use. You're not dragging the whole library with you. So also, if you stay in Dart, because of this, if you don't write any platform channels and use code from the platform, which you can do, you can put Java and Swift into a Kotlin app in order to interface with the framework. But if you don't do that, then you don't need ProGuard or anything else. The compiler will take care of all this. Now, if you start putting Java or Kotlin into your app, yes, you're going to need to use ProGuard. One last point, Flutter uses code generation, not reflection. Okay, so there's no more going around stripping out classes. We're back to taking over the world. Okay. Fuchsia. Fuchsia is the secret weapon. More buzzwords. Capability-based, real-time operating system currently being developed by Google. It's open source. So is Flutter. These are open source. Google is putting a mountain of money behind them. They have reasons. They have 9 billion reasons, if you guys know what I'm talking about. If not, you haven't been following the Oracle lawsuit. Daddy Google wants a divorce from Mommy Oracle and wants it bad. So, but one of the concerns that I'm always hearing is, oh my God, is Flutter going to replace Android? No. Just no. Can you imagine if Google did anything at all that would cut off Android apps? They'd be better off paying Oracle $9 billion a year than to do that. They're not going to do that. They are, however, going to try to shift over to something that will at least allow them to stop having to pay Oracle at all. But believe me, your Android apps are still going to work. So how does Flutter work? How does it do its thing? When you're coding, here's some analogies. Div, gray box. Okay, now you go into your CSS, you set your background color, your width, your height, and your font. In Flutter, that's interesting, okay. They did this as a variable. I didn't write this one. You don't use the new keyword anymore in Dart 2. Yeah. You declare unnamed classes without a new keyword. There's a facial tick for a lot of people. So you declare a container. Container has a parameter called child. It means whatever other class you're going to declare within it. So now we're going to stick a text there. First thing in a text is always the string. Style, we're going to create a text style. There's your font size, there's your font weight, there's your font family. Now, this was written in a way that was a bit confusing. I'm gonna rewrite this. All of this here with the width, height, and color, actually, if you follow straight up the line, it goes with the container. Child, width, height, and color are all on one line. So these really should have been above child, and child should have been last, just to make it a little easier to read. I'll get to it at some point. Okay, someday I'm going to make a fancy slide about all this, but this is actually something you really do want to pay attention to. I am not an expert on how this works in other frameworks, but I understand it takes a whole lot more than this. When you are laying out the screen on a Flutter app, here's what actually happens. Your top screen says to its child, this is how much space you have to work with. What are you actually going to use? And the child says, let me get back to you on that. Goes down to its child, says, this is how much space you have to work with. How much are you going to use? I'll get back to you on that. So your container asks the text. The text asks the text style. Boom, 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 all the way down the line. Then when you get to the bottom of the tree, it says, okay, I'm going to calculate out, here are my dimensions. Passes it up to the parent, says, this is what I'm going to use. The parent says, okay, that's what you're going to use. Cuts off communication. It's important to understand this. It cuts off communication with the child after it knows how big the child's going to be. Then it places the child. This means that at no time does any widget have any idea where it is located on the screen. Its parent knows where it is located relative to itself. So it knows if it took the child and put it up against the right edge or against the left edge of itself, but it doesn't even know where it is on the screen. It makes it a little funky sometimes, but it does work out. But sometimes people run into a problem where they're like, how do I know where my widget is when I want to? That's a whole different discipline right there, figuring that out. It's all over Stack Overflow. It's not that bad, but it's something to be aware of, because when people first run into it, they burn about 4 hours and a lot of hair trying to get through it. So then the parent places the kid, then the parent tells its grandparent, etc. The kid is never told what closet the parent shoved it in. Okay, so it doesn't know where it is. And someday I'll make it. No, not today. Okay, the ultimate truth. Everything is a widget. Some of them change, some of them don't. Widgets that don't have state. An asset image. If you load an image for a header on your app, it's never going to change. Okay, if it is going to change, then you'll determine it in a different way and you'll create another asset image. You're not going to reuse the same one. A text, not really going to change. If you change the text, you're going to be destroying the stateless widget and recreating it anyway. Stateful widgets, things that you're not going to destroy but are going to change. A scrollable. The position of that scroll changes, but that doesn't mean that you destroy the scrollable. Animatable. Okay, a perfect thing to do is to animate icons. You can take a greater than and less than sign, put it in a rotated box, set it to 1/4 turn. There you go. Now you got a goofy little diamond thing. You can do that now. Why you would want to, nobody knows, but you can. Point being, when you start animating things and all this, you don't want to destroy them. You want to, well, animate them. You want to change their state. Various widgets, more of a 101 thing. These are not individual widgets, actually. These are categories of. Okay, general, everything you really need to know. Containers, rows, columns, image assets, text, etc. Material design, all of these are material design compliant. Cupertino, all of these are human interface spec compliant. Layout, how to arrange things. Text, all kinds of ways to style text like crazy. Assets, images, icons. Input, gesture detectors. Animation and motion, interactions, style, 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 painting effects, async operations are a widget. Everything's a widget until it's not. I lied. There are things out there in the world that are not widgets. I said this is not 101. In 101, they tell you everything is a widget. Not true. Everything you deal with 99.999% of the time is going to be a widget. There's the one, actually two tiny times when you might have to deal with an element. One is if you get a crash and you look at it and it says element was marked dirty, yada yada, and wasn't replaced. We'll get to that in a moment. Another one is if you are unit testing your UI. Yes, you can do that without any testing plugin. We don't use Espresso. It's all built in. You can unit test your UI, and you have to do something called pumping the widget. So you set up your UI component in isolation. So basically, if I set up my button in isolation, it's not actually in a page, it's just the button. I'm testing just the button. So then I write the code to interact with the button, and I write my expect, what I expect. And I go ahead and I run that test, and it fails. And it says element does not exist. The hell's an element? They told me everything was a widget. What happened was you didn't pump the widget, and we will get into details about that in just a moment, like now. The widget layer is where you have your UI code. The blueprints are here. They say it is an immutable declaration of blah, blah, blah. It's a freaking blueprint. All right, it's a blueprint. That's a blueprint right there. This is what you get when you make one. Okay, that's your element layer. Think of that as the model home in the development. This is the blueprint. This is the sales model. It's still not rendered to the screen yet. What they do is they make sure that the element matches the blueprint, and then they render it to the screen. The render layer is what is equivalent to the views in Android and iOS. They don't even have a lot of this other stuff. Now, what ends up happening as you go is each frame you're going to do your logic. Your set state calls, which is how you change state, one of the ways you change state, and everything else. It's going to change the data that a lot of your UI relies on. So then you're going to go through each UI element and you're going to say, does what this represents now, basically saying, does my text widget still point to the same variable it did on the last frame? And if my logic changed it, then the answer is no. If my text widget pointed to Hello World last frame, but now it points to Goodbye Cruel World, then that's not right. So it's marked as dirty. It's not destroyed right away, it's just marked as dirty. And that's where you will see sometimes in your console it says such and such marked as dirty. It means that the state has changed or that element is no longer up to date and it needs to go. But for some reason it didn't get destroyed. So what ends up happening then is when you get all the way done with your layout and all the way done figuring out what your widgets are, now it starts wrecking all the dirty ones and bulldozing them. This is where that garbage collector comes in. Okay, you are just trashing anything that is not up to speed and rebuilding it completely from scratch. So as I said, we're going to check to see if each one is the same as the one from last time. So this is from frame 1, this is now frame 2. If it's the same, do nothing. Leave that alone. Don't re-render it. Don't waste the cycles. A quick aside is on a lot of screens they used to invalidate a square. Almost everything still does. A lot of things still do. Flutter does not do that. We do not invalidate part of the screen. We just recreate an individual widget and re-render it that way. It works. So doing this hundreds or thousands of times a frame, destroying these and recreating new ones would be almost impossible without the garbage collector. You just can't do it. It's another reason when people, why Dart? So then we're going to make each render object so it matches the element. Here's the weird part, okay? They say we don't do any mutation in Flutter. Well, you and I don't. The framework deals with it. If the element is changed and it doesn't match here, it'll mutate the render layer. I don't know how it does it. I don't care. The best thing about it is I can't screw it up. So I'm not going to waste 6 hours trying to figure out how I blew it when I tried to mutate something. Framework deals with that for me. Okay? And you can customize everything here in green. This is all Dart. The engine's C++. Okay, dealing with text is a real bear. Dart itself, Skia, is the graphics engine that is drawing to the OpenGL canvas. Foundation, all of your animation, all of your painting, all of your gesture handling, rendering, widgets, material UI elements, Cupertino, human interface. Customizable, every single bit of it. You can fork this repo and screw with it all you want. Publish your app, and you're fine. If what you've done is something you really like, push it. How many of you have ever heard of a guy by the name of Ian Hicksey? Anybody do much web work? He was behind HTML5. Yeah, well, he's the one who's doing most of the pushes into the Flutter repo now. So another thing to do too is if you don't want to fork the whole repo, just look at a widget that is close to what you want, control-click it, go to its actual file, copy it, make a new file, rename it to your own class, and start playing with it. You can do that. Any of these layers, you can do that. So it gives you a level of control you don't have in a lot of other places. So it's like a train wreck. You can't turn away. We're going to take a look at a few things here. Now, I really do wish I would have been able to do this on a screen. I wish I could have casted this. We'll pass around my phone here. Don't kill my phone, please. I knew I met. Well, I'll tell you what, while we're doing this. Go ahead and pass that around. This is a little buggy. It's a prototype. If you lay it flat, it'll go really, really wonky. Okay? If anybody has tried to play around with the IMU and knows that the accelerometer is determined like local coordinates relative to the phone, but rotation is relative to the Earth by the magnetometer. That's playing with it because of that. We need to figure out a way to make the rotation relative to the phone to get that to work really well, because laying flat is where it's messed up. If you stand it up, it works great, except for one little flicker that we're still trying to track down. So this one right here is the one we're actually going to be looking at. Wow. Told you I tried to cut this down. While that's firing up, we'll take a look here since we don't have much time. One other quick thing that should be up to speed is, by the way, I can run this on Windows. It's not very well known yet. It's in pre-alpha. We're playing with it. Long story short is the way that it happened in its early alpha, they had a problem getting emulators, getting Flutter to play nice with emulators on Windows. So they wrote some code to bypass the emulator, basically. And then they fixed it, but they never removed the code. So now there are guys out there, and actually the efforts to do this with iOS and Linux are with Mac and Linux desktops are much further along, from what I understand. But we picked up the torch on the Windows one. We picked up the ball and are running with it. So, pretty sure in a nutshell, what this is doing, oh, shoot, and I don't have time to go. You can catch up with me later. I'll make that actually work. But what it actually does is pretty much the same thing that it does anywhere else, is it opens a surface for Flutter to draw to. And it actually works quite well. So in this particular code that we're running right now, what we're doing is we're going to use scoped model, and we're going to use set state and an orientation builder. Now when you do set state, what you're doing is you create a variable, and when you want to change it, you call set state. And what that does is it runs whatever function you handed it, and then it will set the state. So when you're trying to work with set state, think of it as set state with whatever is in the brackets. It makes your life a lot easier. Okay. So here we are right here. In this case, we will set state with an incremented counter right there. Now, the thing is that set state is only going to work within the class that it's in. It doesn't give you a global reach. For something like that, you either want inherited widget, which is a bit rough to use, even by the terms of the Flutter team, or something called scoped model, which makes it a lot easier, which is what we used here. Okay, and what you do is you have to have a scoped model at some point lower down in the base of the tree, and then at some point higher up where you want to use it, you use a scoped model descendant in order to be able to access that data. Now I cheated. I threw the scoped model all the way down at the very root of the entire app. Okay, sure. But that allowed me to put the scope model descendant anywhere I want. Now what this is actually doing, I know unfortunately we're pretty rushed. The main turns around and it opens a screen up, and it double checks to see a few things. Number one, it double checks to see if it's broken. If not, then it double checks to see what the orientation is. Okay, and this is a wonderful example of how to get a little bit too crazy with your logic inside of your UI. You can put decision logic in the UI. That's what this is right here. So here's our orientation builder. If the counter model Boolean is broken, do this. Else, come down here and double check your orientation. If it's portrait, return the portrait page. Else, return the landscape page. If you go to the portrait page, it's actually pretty simple. What it does basically is it says we're working with portrait and we're going to use set state, and it passes these to the UI module. Now the reason I did this way is because this is one UI module that gets used regardless of which direction you go. If you go the other way, if your orientation is landscape, it will pass that title, it will go to the landscape page, it will set up your scoped model, it will get all the information that you need for running scope model, and then it will turn around and call the UI again, and it will feed it the information that it needs there. Now, if it's broken, we'll go here. It's broken, the condition that is set for it to be broken is if the landscape counter goes over 110. Okay, unfortunately we are out of time right now, but just to show you, there's your portrait. Now in landscape, we're here, and both of these are set up to be persistent. Okay. And now all that decision-making logic that was sitting in the middle of my UI allows you to get a little bit goofy. Okay? No, I mean really goofy. Okay, no, this is a nested ternary in the middle of my UI code. Try doing that in Android's XML. Okay, you can do basically anything. You can use a ternary to call a function from somewhere else that does anything you want. Now, I'm sure there's lots of questions, and I'm sure people have to be somewhere else. I will hang out as long as I can, as long as I don't get in somebody else's way. I can hang out in the hallway. I'm here all day. Okay, as I said, I'm really sorry we had to push this as fast as we did, but it was a 2-hour presentation that had a chainsaw taken to it. But I'm here all day. Any other questions, please let me know. We do have FSG Slack that is not public, but anybody serious enough to show up here gets an invite. Let me know. I'll get you an invite. And there are a lot of other resources out there, such as Flutter Community and a number of other things, and I can tell you who to stalk on Twitter. So with that, thank you for coming, and I will see you around for the rest of the day.